What's up guys, it's Alex here, your friendly reef dog. Now I set up my Red Sea Reefer Peninsula 500 on the 24th of June 2018, and at the time of recording it is the 24th of June 2020, so today I'm going to give you a big 2-year update. Now if this is your first time at the channel and you want weekly reefing goodness, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on anything. Right, let's get stuck in. Now it's been about 4 months since I last updated you, and of course there's been both good and bad news in that time. So I'll kick off with the bad, move on to the good, and I'll finish up by telling you how I run the tank in terms of controlling nitrate and phosphate, my feeding regime, lighting and flow, and how I replenish major and minor elements. So let's kick off with the bad news then. As you'll know if you follow me on Instagram, my earmuff Ras sadly died recently. I came downstairs one morning to find him with his tail bitten off, and while he seemed like he was recovering at first, he then took a swift turn for the worse and died a few weeks after the incident. Now I'm calling it an incident because I don't know who or what did it. I never see any real aggression in my tank, so I'm really none the wiser as to what happened, but it seems obvious that something's had a bit of a jump on him. And unfortunately he's not alone. I also lost a longfin Antheas, but I think I do know the cause of that, and unfortunately it was me. I turned my auto feeder off for a couple of weeks as part of a plan to reduce my phosphate level. I still fed frozen food once a day, but as it turns out that's just not enough for these active fish, and I found him dead with a sunken belly. A stupid error on my part, but a great reminder that you have to be on the ball 100% of the time with a complex reef tank. And finally, in bad news, I still have a small but very real aptasia problem. I've tried a copper banded butterfly and a filefish to no avail, so now I've gone for the sensible option of peppermint shrimp. I haven't actually seen them since putting them in the tank, but I'm confident they'll do the job. I will be giving them a helping hand though by using Aptasia X or something similar to kickstart the process. But that is all of the bad news out of the way, and it's just sweet reefing goodness from here on in. I recently did a video telling you that my biggest mistake on this tank was buying too many corals and packing them in too tightly. And to be honest with you, I gave some serious consideration to breaking the tank down and starting all over again. But after sulking about it for a few weeks, I decided to do what I could to put things right and focus on getting my water quality back to perfection. So I pulled out and sold a number of corals that were causing overcrowding, including this bird of paradise Guttatus, which was one of my largest and fastest growing corals. And I took a set of bone cutters to some of the bigger corals I couldn't remove, like this nice green staghorn coral. Now doing that achieved a few things. Firstly, it earned me enough money to set up a proper frag section in my sump, which I'll do a separate video about soon. But secondly, it instantly gave me more negative space, which makes my tank look much better and gives my fish more swimming room. And now I have lots of space in my sump to keep frags, I'm going to do regular bonsai work on my faster growing corals to stop them from taking over. To give you an idea of the growth I'm getting, here's a video from April 2019 when the tank was just under a year old. Pretty sparse and no sizable corals, but fast forward 14 months and things have really taken off. The key contributing factors recently have been adding more light and flow, reducing phosphate, and feeding Red Sea Reef Energy AB+. To give you an idea of how things have taken off recently, here are a few videos taken just 3.5 months apart. For part of this time I was using Reef Energy, but I actually stopped at one point because I was getting too much growth. And the great thing about these clips is that it shows how much my aquapora have grown, as well as the usual faster growing corals. Now growth is all well and good, but it's nothing without coral colours, and that's where reducing my phosphate has come in. I recently started using Tropic Marine carbon dosing after seeing a live stream on the Reef Dudes YouTube channel. I never understood the Tropic Marine carbon dosing products before, but what they said sounded absolutely awesome. Not only do they remove phosphate, but they also enable the corals to make use of the phosphate to improve their colours and health. Now I've only been using the stuff for around 2 months, but the early signs are very promising. I've had a noticeable improvement in some of my corals colours, including my strawberry shortcake that was more or less brown a couple of months ago. Now it's early days of course, but I'll do a full review of the stuff in 6 months or so when I've got properly used to it. Now although the tank is close to being full in terms of livestock, I do have plans beyond just letting it grow out. I'm still looking for a Japanese swallowtail angelfish to finish off my fish stock. Although I've been looking for one of those for about 2 years and haven't had any luck, so if you see one in the UK, let me know and I'll go and get it. I also still have space for 1 or 2 corals. In particular, I'm after a scolly to brighten up the bottom corner of my tank, and probably a couple of special aquapora corals to finish things off. I recently added this plinth for my favourite acro frag to sit on, and that got me thinking about where else I could put a tower. There is space for a thin one, and I've contacted R&R Aquascapes, which is the company behind the Aaron's Aquariumscape, to see if they can make something for me, so watch this space. Away from livestock, I will also be investing in some more equipment soon. I'll be replacing my Giesman Stella T5 unit with a second Evergrow LED panel, as I'm finding the spread to be pretty poor on the Evergrow, and I think having two side by side will give me the 100% coverage I'm looking for. Some of you will have noticed I recently added a third MP40 powerhead to the far end of my tank as well. I found I had a few flat spots and that most of my aquapora were growing towards the flow, which was all at one end of the tank, which gave a funny lopsided look. But this should even things out a little. I did think about getting a gyre instead of another MP40, but I decided I wanted a smaller unit and crucially something that's easy to clean. Other than that, I'm also likely to get a GHL ion director when they're out to monitor calcium, magnesium, nitrate and a few other things. If I'm honest, I don't really get on with the GHL software, but I'm stuck with it now and they're promising to bring out a few upgrades soon that should improve the user experience. So I'll wait until those updates are out to give you a full review of the KH Director. Now at 2 years old, I think this tank fairly represents a typical journey. It didn't get off to a great start and took a good year before it actually started to properly progress. And even since then I've had a number of setbacks that I've had to overcome. But ultimately, thanks mainly to my borderline obsession with this hobby, I've come out the other side and things are looking fairly positive. So how do I run the tank then? Well, to control nitrate and phosphate I rely on an X-Filter automatic filter roller, a Deltec 600i skimmer, an algae refugium lit by two Tunzi grow lights, and of course more recently I've started dosing Elimi NP and Bactobalance. I also do water changes of 10% every week without fail, and I currently use Red Sea Blue Bucket Salt. One of the questions I get asked most often is whether or not you need to do water changes, and my answer is always that, in my opinion, it is absolutely best to do so. It's often tempting to stop water changes if everything is going well, but my view on that is that everything is probably going well in part because you're doing regular water changes. Importantly, I also filter my own water and I don't accept anything other than 0 TDS water. I don't actually know what my nitrates are, but last time I tested they were around 5 parts per million. My phosphate has always been quite high at around 0.2 or above, but I've recently got that down to around 0.12 and I'd like to reduce it a little further. It's no coincidence that my corals have looked healthier as my phosphate has reduced. I tend to feed 4 cubes of frozen per day, as well as a couple of lots of pellet food and a few strips of nori once or twice a week. I have 23 fish now, which is more or less capacity, but I do think I have space for a couple more. As I've said, I feed my corals with Reef Energy AB Plus from time to time, but apart from that I don't add any other food for corals. In my opinion, fish poo is just too delicious if you're a coral. To maintain calcium and alkalinity, I use ATI Essentials Pro. Supposedly that also contains a number of trace elements, which is just as well because I don't add any myself. Although iodine and manganese are always low when I do ICP tests, so I do intend to do something about that at some point. My alkalinity is usually around 9 DKH, but it does tend to fluctuate between 8.5 and 10. In an ideal world I'd have it at 8 DKH, but as long as it's more or less stable, I'm really not too fussy. I rarely test calcium, but the last time I did it was around 390 parts per million, which is a little on the low side and I'd like to increase it slightly, but again, as long as it's stable, I'm not that fussed. For flow I have 3 MP40s running at around 70%, mainly on Reef Crest and Short Pulse, with a little bit of gyre mode thrown in occasionally. I run my Vortec L1 return pump at 50% as it gets a little bit more noisy if I have it any higher. And for lighting I of course have a 230 watt Evergrow LED with 4 54 watt T5 tubes, being 2 ATI Blue Plus, 1 Coral Plus and 1 True Actinic for a little bit of fancy colour. Now I think I've covered more or less everything about how I run my tank, but if you've got any questions or you want to know any more detail, ask me in the comments section below. Now one other question I get asked all the time is to run through a list of all the fish I've got, so I'm going to do that for you right now and I'm going to put up pictures of them up there. So the fish I have are a radiant wrasse, a silver belly wrasse, a fox-faced rabbitfish, 2 Da Vinci clownfish, a Midas blenny, a Randall's goby, a scarlet hawkfish, a long-nosed hawkfish and a falco hawkfish, a geometric pygmy perchlet, 5 resplendent antheas, a royal grammer, a yellow wrasse, a purple tang, a cleaner wrasse, an Ayoko wrasse, a jawfish and a scarlet dragonet. Now, if my maths is right, that is 23 fish, which is quite a lot in a tank this size, but I do have an awful lot of filtration. If you enjoyed the video, then give me a thumbs up and subscribe for next week, and until then, happy reefing.